This morning, we are indeed very fortunate to be able to invite Brother Billy Tan, who is actually a very well-sorted speaker on this subject. Brother Billy is a business development consultant and professional trainer who has trained countless business professionals in more than 20 countries. Brother Billy is a certified master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, a certified Six Sigma Black Belt practitioner, and a certified clinical hypnotherapist. In sharing the Dhamma, Brother Billy enjoys connecting findings from neuroscience and psychology to present teachings of the Buddha from a scientific and modern perspective. And today's topic that Brother Billy is giving to us is entitled Satipatthana as a Psychotherapy. So, without further ado, may I pass the mic to Brother Billy.
Good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. I'm very happy to be invited back to Buddhist Gem Fellowship. It's been a while since I was last here. Now, the topic of today's sharing is Satipatthana as a psychotherapy. Now, the Buddha has actually offered quite a lot of teachings, and amongst many of the teachings, the one that actually can help us to calm the mind very well and also to cultivate a state of mental composure or emotional composure, it is the Satipatthana. And in fact, the Satipatthana has multiple usage. Apart from being able to calm our mind and cultivate our mind, it also can help us purify the mind. It can also help us as a guide in practicing meditation, because the whole purpose of meditation at the end of the day is really to purify the mind, and it is the purification of the mind that can lead us to Nibbana. So when we practice meditation, we should be thinking of purifying the mind. Whereas a lot of people, when they practice meditation, they may be thinking of other kind of benefits beyond that, like, oh, I want to attain Nibbana, I want to become Arahant, or I want to experience the 4 jhanas. When you have those kinds of aspirations, there's nothing wrong with those. But when you have those kinds of aspirations, you're not really very focused on the really true purpose and goal of meditation, which is purification of the mind. Because the Buddha basically taught us how to purify our mind to free us from suffering. The Buddha really only taught one big subject, and that's called dukkha. How dukkha arises, and how dukkha, what are the causes of dukkha, and how actually we can end dukkha, and finally, what are the ways leading to the ending of dukkha. So practicing meditation, using Satipatthana, these are some of the ways, part of the ways to end dukkha. Now, today's sharing, I'm going to draw from the teachings of the Buddha in Satipatthana, but I'm going to combine it also with research in the fields of cognitive psychology, as well as cognitive science and neuroscience, in order to explain a bit about what goes on in the mind and how we can actually apply this teaching to become more peaceful and actually, more importantly, to become happier in life. So this is a very practical application of the teaching of Satipatthana. So this is the sharing today then basically applies to what we do in a day-to-day basis, not so much in what we do in a meditation basis. Now, unfortunately, this morning, for some reason, my Apple MacBook does not seem to work with the projector, so I'm not able to use my Apple. I can't see what's on the screen. I'm borrowing another computer inside. So I have to turn around to look at the screen to see where I'm going. So, all right. All right. Today we're going to explore the teachings the teachings of the Buddha from a scientific perspective. First, in order to understand how to apply Satipatthana, we must understand why we're doing it. We're doing it because we're experiencing stress and distress. Stress is really a physical suffering. We experience stress, the body changes, things in the body changes, and then it makes us feel tensed, it makes us agitated, and that disturbs the mind. And that leads to distress. Distress is really a mental suffering. So the Buddha described two kinds of suffering. Dukkha generally refers to the physical suffering. Domanassa refers to the mental suffering. So we take a look at how that arises because of our emotions. And then we're going to take a look at how paying attention and cultivating awareness of bodily and mental conditions can provide us this early warning system. You see, before we feel sad, angry, fearful, hateful, the body starts to change. So what we're learning today is how we can pay attention to these bodily changes, and that can actually help us to detect that, oh, I'm about to experience some kind of mental suffering. And then if you know that, you can prevent it from getting out of control. And then we're going to learn the basic techniques. First is to learn to relax the body and compose the mind. And then we apply these 4 focuses of introspection or introspective attention, which is commonly called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what we end up doing is to help us reduce stress, tame our emotions, and cultivate a more peaceful and happier life. In order to understand all this, the first thing we have to understand is a very basic understanding of what is in the mind. So we look at mind as an activity. The Buddha used 3 words to describe the mind, because the word mind can be very daunting. You know, when I ask you, what is your mind? You know, what is the mind? And then people will start wondering, you know, so many other things. But the Buddha was very wise. He used 3 words that precisely explain what the mind is. And in fact, today, many scientists are beginning to realize that and discover that. Not that they have studied the Buddha Dhamma, but their conclusions, their finding, the neuroscientists are beginning to discover that what the mind is all about is very consistent with what the Buddha has taught. Right? So the first word the Buddha used to describe the mind is vijnana. Vijnana really is referring to the process of perception, where we now have a perception arising in the mind, and when we become aware of something that's happened in our environment. So the awareness of something that has happened, that is vijnana. This is what is perceived through the sense organs. This awareness comes from our sense organs, which is picking up stimulations from the environment. Then we're able to see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. So being aware of what you have seen, you have heard, smell, taste, or touch, that awareness is vijnana. Some people translate that word as consciousness, but from a scientific perspective, consciousness is actually more than vijnana. So I'm just using the simple translation from my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, that vijnana really means perception, having seen, heard, smelled, taste, or touched something. So this is the first activity that arises in the mind when our sense organ is stimulated. This is the result of the panchakanda, or the 5 aggregates, what is commonly translated 5 aggregates, the panchakanda. So now we have a perception of something. The next thing is the mind begins to interpret and try to give meaning to it. And this process is called mano. And scientists are actually calling this process cognitive process, right? Mano. And this is really enabling us to interpret what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch. So that process is called conception. We create concepts, create stories in our mind. Oh, what have I seen? I have seen this. Oh, this means that. So the meaning we give is a concept we create in the mind. At the same time, we also have the ability to think creatively, which means we're able to create new thoughts, new concepts. So this thinking is called intellect. So this mano is made of really 2 kinds of thought process: the conception and the intellect. And this helps us to give meaning to whatever we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch. At the same time, everything we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, there is a sensation. That sensation leads to a feeling of whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. The scientists have started to discover that whenever we see something, we don't need to be able to understand what it is. Our body will begin to react whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. And this was precisely what the Buddha has been telling us. That every time we see something, there is a feeling associated with it, which is pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And they can lead to the 3 unwholesome states of lobha, dosa, moha, which is greed, hatred, and delusion. So that part of the mind that gives rise to that is called chitta. Scientists call that the affective process, commonly called emotions, because that's really what emotion is all about. We begin to react to these pleasant or unpleasant sensations that we experience. So that reaction is because of an emotional excitement. So that's why it's called emotion. And at the same time, every time we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch anything, we begin to personalize it and say, this is mine, this is I, me, and mine. So this I, me, and mine syndrome is because of our memory, imagination, and expectations. So chitta is responsible for all this. So if you think about it, all the suffering that we experience, a lot of it has to do with how our chitta is working. Our ability to overcome all that is to do with how our mano is working. So it is our thinking, our conscious, rational thinking, wholesome thoughts that can help lead us out of suffering. But it is our emotional excitement, emotional reaction that actually leads us deeper into suffering. So basically, these are the three parts of the mind. And these are not like three things. They are activities. The mind is an activity. The mind is not an existence. It doesn't exist. It is an activity. You can experience it, but you cannot hold it. You cannot point to it. You know, when people say, oh, where is your mind? Most people, what do? They point here. But that is only the brain. The brain is just the biochemical reactions that give rise to those activity. The mind is the activity behind it. The mind is not something you can hold on to, or you can grasp, or you can say this is the mind. The mind is an activity. And the only way we know there is a mind is the experience. Experiencing the mind. Experiencing the experience. That is mind. So with that basic understanding, we can then move on to take a look at how we become stressed, and at the same time how we can overcome that. So let's take a look at what happens then when the environment around us, everything that's happening around us, stimulate our sense organs. They stimulate our sense organs, so our ear, because we have our eyes, ear, nose, tongue, and body, we're able to feel the activities of the environment. And when that stimulation occurs, there is a perception in the mind. We have seen something, we have heard something, we have smelled something. That gives us the ability to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch because of these sense organs in our body. Now, that is vijnana, having been able to perceive what these sense organs have picked up from the environment. And with that perception, the mind begins to interpret it. And that is the mano. The mano part of the mind tries to interpret it by drawing on past experiences. We always interpret things from memory. Whether we like it or not, every time we see something, we make an immediate connection to experience of the past. So this connection is called papancha. Some people translate this as mental proliferation, but my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, he pointed out this is really not mental proliferation yet. This is basically just interpretation of what we have seen. Mental proliferation comes later. It's as a result of emotional excitement. So, papancha really is the way we interpret what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch, and the way we give meaning to this experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. So that meaning given is called recognition. That's why it's because of the cognitive process. And if you realize it, the word recognition, that means recognition. We recognize something. How do you recognize something? Because of your memory. Now, having recognized something, there is a feeling associated with it. And that feeling can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And that feeling gives rise to this process or this activity called the chitta. The chitta begins to react to that feeling. Whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, the reaction of the chitta actually triggers a biochemical reaction in the body. We don't realize it, but it happens all the time. I can say one word and you will begin to feel something in your body. I just say one word, and that word is asam laksa. How many of you are feeling sourness in your mouth? You see? Why? Because you heard that word, you interpreted the meaning. The meaning is something soury that you have tasted in the past, and the body reacts. All right? And that reaction is a biochemical reaction in the body that's going on. And that causes you to salivate, you know. Some of you who love asam laksa, you will begin to salivate. Some of you who hate asam laksa, you will become angered by it, You get an aversion. This is where lobha dosa arises. If you like asam laksa and I said asam laksa, then you begin to feel excited. That is lobha, lust and greed. Now, if you hate asam laksa, you hate anything sour, and I say asam laksa, you begin to withdraw a little bit. And that's dosa, aversion. See? That is how lobha dosa moha arises. Right? And then, this biochemical reaction in the body stresses the body. It causes changes in the body. It causes your heart to beat faster and all that. We're going to take a look at what really causes what reactions in the body. It's a stress reaction, commonly called fight or flight reaction. So that disturbs the body. And this disturbance of the body is then felt. Now, this feeling is a feeling in the body, and that gives rise to emotional thoughts. This feeling usually comes in some kind of a physical form. You feel it. It's a physical feeling. So this is dukkha, the physical experience, the physical pain that you may experience. Dukkha. So, for lack of a better word, then I'll use dukkha to refer to stress, and stress means physical suffering. So now let's take a look at what happens. See, this physical suffering is the result of physiological disturbance, hormones in the body being released, biochemical reactions in the body happening, causing this fight or flight reaction. It's stressful. What happens? You see, when you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something, the brain sends a signal down the nervous system, right? Down this nervous system, and then it arrives at various glands. One of the glands it arrives at is this adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is located directly above your kidney. So those of you who have two kidneys, then you will have two adrenal glands. And adrenal gland releases two very powerful hormones. These are stress-related hormones. The first one it releases is adrenaline. Adrenaline basically does some simple things and make you tense, that's all. But it is the next hormone that is released that is causing us a lot of suffering, and that is cortisol. Cortisol is a very harmful stress hormone. The more it is released in the body, the more suffering you will experience physically. Right? So what does it do? First, when it reaches the heart, it causes your heart to beat faster. That's why when you get when you're fearful, when you're excited, when you're angry, the first symptom is your heart beats faster. That's really the very first physical symptom. The heart beats faster, blood pressure rises. That's why people who are often stressed, they get hypertension. They experience hypertension, blood pressure rises. And then when these hormones reach your respiration system, your lungs, it causes you to breathe deeper. Your breath deepens. And then when it reaches your intestinal system, digestive system, it suspends the activity of the digestive system. Why? Because now your body your senses have picked up that something has gone wrong. Something has happened that is stressing you. Now your body must react. But your digestive system draws a lot of energy from your body. So all this energy being drawn away reduces your capacity to react. So one of the powerful effects of cortisol is to suspend this digestive system so that it releases the energy for the rest of your body to have more energy to react to any threat, any fear, or in fact to react to any lust or greed even. Right? When you get excited and you want something, you're very energetic, and that is because the energy from your digestive system has been released, become available for you to use to go after your lustful desires or to stop and prevent your painful experiences, either one. And then when it reaches your muscle, it causes your muscle to tense up. You realize that when you are fearful, whether it is fearful, anger, or whatever, your muscles are tense when you get emotional. Have you ever seen people who get very emotional and they're very relaxed? No such thing, it doesn't happen. The muscle is tensed because of adrenaline. And then when these hormones reach other parts of the body, what else does it do? First, it causes your hair to stand on end. Now, this is an evolutionary remnant of an evolutionary past. Today, we don't have this long hair and we cannot see our hair standing on end, but you can see it in animals. Animals, you can see that the hair is standing on ends. So, what we can do, we can feel this experience. When our hair stands on end, it's called goose pimples, goosebumps. That is because your hair is standing on end. Straighten up, your half-inch or quarter-inch hair and your body is straightening up. So you feel the goose pimple. When it reaches your eyeball, your pupils dilate in order to open up so that you can now see more clearly, to help protect you from harm or to help you go after your lustful and greedy desires. And then your facial expression distorts. As you know that when you see people who are fearful and angry, their facial expression is distorted. You don't see people angry and fearful, very calm face. That doesn't happen. And if you're greedy for something, when people get excited, that kind of expression, your facial expression will distort because of that. And then it causes other symptoms like respiration, trembling, body temperature rising, and finally, two very powerful things that it does. First, it actually increases the blood sugar in order to help metabolism, to help you convert stored energy into active energy for you to react to whatever it is you're going after or avoiding. And at the same time, it suspends your body's immune system, because otherwise your body immune system will try to counteract all these activities. So you can see how powerful cortisol is. Cortisol can suspend your immune system. If you take a look at this, do you think it's going to be a healthy condition or a harmful condition? Very harmful, extremely harmful. What happens when your immune system is suspended? You easily fall sick. Very easily, you catch all the sickness from the bacteria in the environment. And then what happens if your blood sugar level rises frequently? You become diabetic. So what happens when you perspire and tremble a lot? Then you start to lose your body temperature, or you get dehydration and things like that. What happens when your facial expression distorts too much? You get wrinkles all over your face. It is called railway tracks. So people who get railway tracks on their face, usually it's because they have had very emotional life. And this, it depends on the age life. If you see people in their 40s and 50s with a lot of railway tracks in their face, that means they've had a very emotional life. People who have lived a life of happiness and peace, normally the facial complexion is very smooth, like mine. Yeah. When you see them having wrinkles at early age, 40 years old, start to have all kinds of wrinkles, then you know they've had a very emotional life. What happens when your pupils dilate too much? When you get old, your eyesight weakens tremendously. You need to wear glasses and very hard to see clearly. What happens if your hair stands on end too often? Sooner or later, no more hair to stand on end. Right? What happens if your muscle all tensed up? You see, then you get all kinds of aches. Neck ache, body ache, shoulder ache, back ache. All kinds of aches happening in your body, and some people will then have to go for their regular tuina, to go for their regular massage. But actually there is a better way to relieve all these aches. It's called meditation. Meditation can help you relieve a lot of these aches that you experience. And what happens if your digestive system is suspended? Well, because if you have any kind of ulcer, suspending the digestive system means all these enzymes that are released in your body, they begin to react with your ulcer and causing your ulcer to worsen. So actually they cause the worsening of ulcer. What happens if your heart beats too fast and your blood pressure rises? If your blood pressure rises, then you are experiencing hypertension. Right? That's why people with high blood pressure usually also have diabetic conditions because of stress. And not only that, scientists have said the heart is an organ that can only work for pump so many times in a lifetime, so many billion times. Now what happens if it frequently beats faster? That means your life is being shortened. Simple as that. You live a shorter life. Very rarely do you find people highly stressed living till a ripe old age. It's not common. People who are highly stressed, they actually can experience all kinds of cardiovascular diseases, heart attack, and so on. Right? So all these are very harmful to you. So the whole purpose of meditation, the whole purpose of practicing all these good teachings of the Buddha is to help you relieve that stress, reduce the stressful effects on your body. Right? It's never too late, even if you have lived a stressful life. If you're 40-something, you look in a mirror and you see wrinkles. Don't get angry with me for saying that, but you must have had a pretty stressful life. It is not too late. Learn meditation. and practice it, and then you will find yourself being able to relieve yourself of a lot of these stressful conditions. So this is the physical suffering, dukkha. So what happens when you experience this dukkha? This dukkha is then felt in the body. Oh, I'm getting old. Oh, I'm losing my hair. And all this, and it disturbs the mind. And disturbing the mind actually triggers the arising of memory, imagination, expectation. Lobha, dosa, moha arises. If it is something you like, you want to go after it. If something you don't like, you want to get rid of it. So that's lobha, dosa. At the same time, we personalize every experience. Personalizing every experience, we begin to think, this is me, this is I, this is mine. And this is the delusion of the existence of self. That means the delusion of a self-centered existence. Everything is about me, what I want, what I like, the I, me, and mine. So that is the moha part. Lobha refers to the lust and greed for something pleasurable. Dosa refers to the aversion and hatred of something unpleasant. And moha refers to the delusion of self-centered existence when we begin to personalize or cling on to our experiences. Clinging on to our experiences is one of the most powerful forms of suffering that the Buddha pointed about. Clinging on to the panchakanda, clinging on to our 5 aggregates that we're experiencing from the environment. We cling on to it. So that is causing this self-centered existence, and that is moha. Now, this memory, imagination, expectation that arises begins to disturb our thinking mind, because this arises from chitta. Now chitta is disturbing mano. So the two are fighting. So when the two are fighting, they are pulling in opposite directions. On one hand, you have the mano saying that, oh, I should make friends with him. On the other hand, the emotion says, no, he said something nasty to me. I'm very angry with him. So this is the two things that's happening in the mind, fighting. Think about it. The last time a good friend of yours said something that you don't like. Now your thinking mind will say to you, he's your good friend. Continue to be good friends. But your emotional mind says, I'm so angry. He called me fat. He saw me. He said, I'm getting fatter every day. He think he very skinny. And all these. So the emotion fights. So there is a battle going on between emotion and thinking and intellect. And that battle is a tug of war inside the body, right? Inside the mind, actually. There's a tug of war that's going on. And the Buddha pointed out that if you read the translations of Bhikkhu Bodhi, when you look at many of the sutras from the Nikayas, you will notice from time to time there is mention of 2 words, fever and vexation. So what do they mean? Fever is Buddha's way of describing this hormonal change in the body, the biochemical reactions in the body. Fever doesn't really mean the person is having fever, because there are many sutras that says when you experience lust or experience greed, you begin to experience fever and vexation. Now that fever doesn't mean that you are actually getting a high temperature, but the Buddha was using the word fever so that people could understand. Think about it, 2,600 years ago, people didn't understand what is the meaning of hormones. But today we do, because we studied science. Most of us would have learned a little bit about science one way or another, so we know what hormones are. But those days people don't understand that. So Buddha used the word fever to describe it. Okay? Vexation means a disturbance to the mind. So it's a mental suffering. Fever is the physical suffering. Vexation is the mental suffering. So, very important to realize that human being is the only species of animal that regrets the past, fearful of the future, and dissatisfied with the present moment. We never live in the moment. Every time we think something, it is associated with some thoughts from memory. It is associated with some thoughts from imagination. It is associated with some thoughts from expectations. This is why it makes us very self-centered. So we have to be careful. But animals don't behave like that. Animals live in the moment. They're hungry, they will chase after food. When they have food, they don't need the food anymore. They may play with their prey, but they will not go, eating more than they need. Animals don't do that. A snake doesn't swallow two lambs. Once a snake swallows one lamb, then he's happy for the next 1 week. It doesn't go swallowing the second one. Many of us, when we enjoy something, we're going to take more than we really need. And that is why this is the human condition. Now, the Buddha pointed out very importantly, why? Why? It's all because of emotion. And he said very clearly, he says, emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Distress means mental suffering. Emotion is the one thing to which all are spellbound. That means if we are not careful, if we allow our emotion to take over our experiences, to take over our reactions, then we are under the spell of emotion. We are under the control of emotion. And that actually is not a very healthy thing to do. We have to be very careful. Learn to calm our emotional mind. And that is called emotional composure. A calm and peaceful mind is a composed mind. And it's very important to learn how to do that. So today we will start looking at a few simple techniques towards that. Today's sharing is actually the first of two. There are two parts sharing. Today is part one, talking more about the body. The next sharing, I will talk more about the mind, the emotions actually. So, and how do we do that? The Buddha has said, now we saw this verse in the Dhammapada just now, the verse 1, that first verse that we recited. We have to be aware, everywhere in the sutras, wherever the Buddha used the word mano or chitta, unfortunately, all the translators just translate it to the word mind. And it gets confusing because you don't realize that it is really not just generically mind that Buddha was talking about. When Buddha spoke about this verse, the first verse of Dhammapada, verse 1, Buddha was referring to mano. What is mano? Mano is our thinking, our intellect, our ability to make conscious, rational decision. If something disturbs us and we think and get angry and hateful towards it, it is like the wheel that is following the cart, you see. But if something disturbs us and we think of peace and calm, then we are able to experience happiness, like the shadow that follows us. So this is really what the Buddha meant. That mano is really our ability to think rationally, think intelligently. So that is the power of cognition, the ability to think rationally. So the Buddha actually used the word mano pubangama, not chitta. Chitta is emotional. Chitta was used in the previous one, right? The word chitta here, chittesa, well, the words don't line up because the computer font and my PowerPoint font don't match. But Buddha used the word chitta. So it's emotion Buddha was referring to. That is causing us suffering. So emotion is causing us suffering, and mano, the thinking part, is helping us overcome that suffering. That's what it is. So now what happens when we begin to experience this physical suffering and then the mental suffering arises? What can we do? Well, from the first verse of the Dhammapada, mano, use your mano, use the power of your thinking, the power of your conscious rational thoughts. And that is using that cognitive process here, the mano. And what do we need to do first? Learn to be mindful. And what does it mean to be mindful? And this is where Satipatthana comes in. The first foundation of mindfulness is to be aware of what goes on in your body, the body part. So be aware of what happens in your body. Be conscious of bodily conditions. And what kind of bodily conditions you should be aware of? The very first thing is your heartbeat. You know, this is the first symptom something is going wrong. When your heart starts to beat faster, it is a warning to you something is happening to you. You may not realize what it is, but something not so good is happening. I wouldn't use the word bad or evil, but something unwholesome or something unpleasant is happening to you. Realize that. And then there are other parts of the body that will also react. I pointed out earlier these reactions. Your breathing, it deepens. And your muscles. And the most common muscle that get tensed up when you get angry, fearful or whatever, consciously or unconsciously, is the jaw area. You know, your teeth begin to bite at each other. Your tongue hits at the top of your palate really hard. And then your jaw is all tensed up. These are some of the symptoms. When you realize that, you know something is really happening and you've got to do something about it. Learn to relax, right? So what else? Facial expression. You realize that, you begin to cringe up. Your face begins to cringe up. Other things happening. Your voice gets louder and gets higher pitch. You see, when you get excited, angry or fearful, your voice pitch goes up. And then your fist and arm are all tensed up. And when you're angry, you begin to want to punch somebody or hit somebody. That's why your fist and arm is all tensed up. Your neck and shoulder is all tensed up. This is why when we are too stressed too regularly, we get a lot of neck ache and back ache. And then upper back, lower back, and our body temperature rises and so on. So these are some of the areas of your body you should constantly be aware, be mindful. Realize something has gone wrong in an unconscious way. Because emotion arises unconsciously. You will not be aware of it until you experience a symptom. By the time you experience the symptoms of emotion, and what are the symptoms of emotion? It makes you get angry. It makes you get fearful. Right? It puts you in a deep state of sadness or hatred. Now, by the time you experience sadness or hatred, it's a little late already. Right? So, realize something is about to change, and then you can do something about it. And this is the first foundation of mindfulness, the part about the body. I'm going to come to the 4 foundations of mindfulness later on. So when you are able to use your rational thinking, then you can do something about it. What can you do? Pause, relax, and think. When you find yourself getting excited, learn to pause. Whatever it is, do not react right away. Give it some time. Pause and relax. One of the easy way to relax, take a deep breath. This age-old saying, when you get angry or fearful, just take a deep breath. That works. So when you feel something happening in your body, pause, don't react, and then take a deep breath. So these are some of the ways you can help overcome that condition. Because when that happens, it gives you time to think. You can now think, what can I do to overcome this situation or this problem? Because if you don't think and you begin to react, then your reaction will be reaction out of anger or hatred, reaction out of fear or frustration, or reaction out of shame or guilt. And all these reactions are very unwholesome. It leads you to execute those unwholesome karmas, right? And so this is the 3 steps of compassion. Pause, relax, and think. So what do you do when you pause? You allow time for emotional excitement to subside, and anxiety to calm down, and hormonal reactions to subside. That means your hormones will wear off. See, hormones don't stop right away. Once they are released, it takes a little bit of time for it to subside. It's like a fan. When you switch off a fan, does the fan stop right away? No, it takes a bit of time for it to spin down. Same thing, when your body has released these hormones, they don't disappear right away. It takes a little bit of time for it to wear off. How much time? That depends on the individual. Depends on individual's metabolic rate in the body. And also depends on how good you are at calming yourself. How fast can it be? It can be 1 second. That means you can actually calm down within a matter of 1 or 2 seconds if you have trained your mind well. Or it can take as long as 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Some people, it will last for a whole hour. They get angry for the next 1 whole hour. There are some people like that. So it depends on the individual. But if you train your mind well, you can actually calm down within a minute. That's how fast it can be. Even a matter of seconds, you can. Just pause, don't react, take a deep breath. In a minute's time, you feel better. Then you're able to think. Right? So that's what you can do. Pause. Relax is to take a deep breath. Slow down your breathing. And this is actually also a good practice on a daily basis. We breathe too quickly all the time. Right? Learn to slow down your breath. Not only when you are angry or fearful, but also under normal circumstances. And when you're walking, when you're standing, when you're sitting, when you're doing something, just learn to breathe longer. How long? 5 seconds is okay. 4, 5, 6 seconds, depending on the individual. But most of us are breathing 2 or 3 seconds each way. Think about it. These are 2 or 3 second breathing, and we do that all the time. Learn to slow down, slow breath. 4, 5, or 6 seconds in, equal amount of time out. Just practice this whenever you have any time. It actually calms down your mind very quickly. Not only relaxes your body, but calms down your mind. Consciously compose the mind. Now you're able to respond. That's when the think comes in. Think itself is an acronym. I'll explain that later. But this actually means you purposefully focus on what you can do to overcome the situation. Wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. And basically, it leads us to freedom from this mental proliferation, because otherwise the mind runs away. And that is mental proliferation. So relaxing the body is conscious relaxation, and that basically, the biochemical activities in the body gradually subside when you do that. And tension in the body eases. Now your body becomes more comfortable. And the mind no longer disturbed by tensions in the body, because the body is now more comfortable. Very important to realize this point. A relaxed body is an absolute necessary condition for a calm mind. If your body is not relaxed, you can't calm your mind. In the same way, when you meditate, if your body is not relaxed, you can't meditate properly. You will be agitated. So learn to relax the body and then calm the mind. Calm the mind is introspective attention. Bring your attention inwards. Relaxed body suggests that there are no threats now. Your body is able, your mind can be calm because there's nothing more threatening it. And pay attention to whatever that is repetitive, flowing, or rhythmic activity. And what are these? These can be anything you can do. You can do exercises, right? You can, even while you're doing some exercises, that is a rhythmic activity. But if you think about it, there is one very important rhythmic, repetitive, and flowing activity in your body that's going on. What is it? Your breathing. So observe your breathing. That is a very powerful way to calm the mind. That's why observing breathing is a very useful technique. And this is called Anapanasati. In fact, in the Anapanasati Sutra, the Buddha pointed out that practicing Anapanasati and developing it further, and when you reach a point when it is well developed, it helps you to eliminate the 5 hindrances, right? Your lust and greed, your anger and hatred, and your agitation and restlessness, and your apathy and sloth and torpor conditions, and your skeptical doubt and cognitive dissonance, the mind being torn apart. All this can be calmed down by practicing Anapanasati. So basically, pay attention to your breathing. This is why paying attention to breathing is important. Not analyzing your breathing. We're not here to analyze anything. Just observe it. Am I breathing long? Am I breathing short? Is the breathing deep or is the breathing shallow? And then just observe the breathing, and that in itself calms the mind very quickly. And then you have this conscious focus, attention on the present moment. Now you're ready to think what you should do to overcome the problem. So there is no more mental proliferation, your mind doesn't run away, and the mind calms down. That's when you can make good conscious decision. No further arousal of biochemical reactions in the body. So what happens when you are practicing conscious relaxation? You are actually helping to break the biochemical reactions in the body. That means you are actually allowing the biochemical reactions in the body to subside, all the hormones to gradually drain away. They will happen. And how fast can they drain away? If you are good at it, within a minute, your whole body will calm down. Your whole body will become fully relaxed within a minute. If you're not good at it, it might take a minute or two, not more than 5 minutes, you can be relaxed. You know, if you stop reacting and just breathe, within a matter of minutes, you are very, very calm already. You can do that. And when you calm your mind, you're withdrawing your mind and eliminating it from mental proliferation caused by imagination, memory, expectations. How can you break away from memory, imagination, expectation? By focusing on your breath. When you're paying attention on your breath, you are no longer thinking about yesterday's problems. You're not thinking about tomorrow's worries. You're not thinking about trying to change the present moment. You are actually observing what goes on inside your body. That is introspective attention. So that is how you can actually break away from this emotional excitement. So let's take a look at the teaching of the Satipatthana. I already mentioned the first part, right? Satipatthana. Unfortunately, this word Satipatthana has been constantly translated as mindfulness by a lot of Westerners. And the word mindfulness Nothing wrong with it, but it's a bit confusing in some cases. If you Google mindfulness, you will find 100 different definitions. You might even ask 5 different psychologists, what's the meaning of mindfulness? They will probably give you 5 different responses. There are some people who say mindfulness is when you observe what goes on around you and pay attention to it. That's one way. But the Buddha didn't say that. What did the Buddha say about mindfulness? Then we have to examine the meaning of the word Satipatthana. What exactly does it mean? And this is the translation from my teacher. He pointed out very clearly. The word Satipatthana came from 3 root words. Sati, which means attention. Upa. Upa means within, going inwards. Tana. Tana means to place or to focus. In other words, what does it mean? To place attention within. Now, what does that mean then? That means don't get distracted by what you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. That's really what it means. Bring your attention inwards. And bringing this attention inwards, it is an introversion of attention. Bringing attention inwards, it is called introspection. So the real meaning of Satipatthana, introspection. Or if you want a more precise meaning, introspective attention, bringing your attention inwards. The word introspection comes from 2 root words, 2 English root words. Intro. Intro is going inwards, introverted, as against opposed to extroverted. An introverted person is one who just focuses on himself. An extroverted person is able to interact with other people easily. Right? So intro means inwards. Spection comes from the word inspection. Examining, observing, right? Not analyzing, just observing and inspecting. Just observing and inspecting only. So that is really Satipatthana, introspection. And the Buddha then said this in the Satipatthana Sutta. And in fact, this is all repeated also in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Basically, the Buddha said, monks, this is the direct way for purification of beings, for overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for extinguishing suffering and grief, for the attainment and realization of Nibbana. The direct way is the 4 focuses of introspection. So my teacher said that these 4 areas are 4 focuses of introspection, but it is commonly translated as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. It's actually the more precise meaning is 4 focuses of introspection. 4 areas to focus on. That's why it's called 4 focuses of introspection. And it is commonly translated as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So we're going to use the word introspection instead of mindfulness, because mindfulness conjures a whole lot of other meaning, especially in the Western world. They try to commercialize this so much that the meaning of the Buddha's teaching is completely lost. And they try to make it so secular, they try to take away any hint that it is of Buddhist origin. And they distort it so much. Commercialized versions of mindfulness. So if you Google mindfulness, you're going to get a whole lot of things that might even confuse you. They're not the original teachings of the Buddha. They may be helpful in some other ways, but if you really want to follow the Buddha Dhamma, then you have to take a look at what the Buddha meant by this form of introspection. So this is what the Buddha said. It is the direct way. It can actually lead you to Nibbana if you practice and perfect it. So now, the Buddha went on to say, now I'm going to first show you the traditional translation. Very important, translation can mislead people in some ways. So what are the 4? The first is, here bhikkhus, a bhikkhu abides contemplating body as a body, feeling as feeling, mind as mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief of the world. Now notice actually the word mind. Chitta is commonly translated as mind. As I pointed out to you, whenever Buddha says chitta, he didn't mean mind in general. He was very specific. And then the word Dhamma is often translated as mind objects. Now Dhamma has a few meanings. One of the meaning of Dhamma is experience. Actually, the real meaning of Dhamma is experience, but often the word Dhamma, when they refer to Buddha Dhamma, they translate it to mean the truth. But actually the real meaning, the Pali word Dhamma really means experience. And that experience arises in the form of activities in the mind. And this is sometimes called thoughts. So Dhamma could be thoughts, could be experience. But you see the translation, mind objects. But what the Buddha really meant is emotion. What the Buddha really meant there is conception. The way thoughts are created. That is because of your experience. It is the experience. Every moment we are experiencing thoughts. And that is conception. So the Buddha really meant emotion and conception. The Buddha didn't mean mind and mind objects. But the translators just used those words. Now I will show you another one more word here. Mindful. So what the Buddha really meant is introspection. Now I will show you a revised translation from my teacher. The 4 focuses of introspection. The first 2 are okay. Kaya means body, that's fine. Vedana means feeling, that is the sensation in the body, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. Whether it is agitating the body or it is soothing the body. And then comes the emotional state. So the first one, Kaya, means bodily activities, reactions in the body. How did the body react? And the second word, Vedana, means feeling of tension. Now you feel agitated. You feel pain, discomfort, or something pleasant, something soothing, something comfortable. Right? That is the feeling. Then Chitta. Chitta is emotional state. My teacher pointed out it is emotional state. Affection, mood, temperament, emotional states. That's really what Chitta means. So here the Buddha was actually asking you to observe your emotional states. Now if we were to say to observe your mind, you get a little bit confused. How can I observe my mind? So many things going on in my mind. But here, only observing what goes on with your emotional states. And then, the last one is observing the formation of thoughts. The concepts and interpretation. How did I interpret those circumstances? The interpretation of your circumstances. So that is really Dhamma. How thoughts are constructed. Right? So this is really the real meaning. And then the word here is not mindful. Not mindful. It is introspective attention. Bring your attention inwards. Right? Not just the word mindful, but that word mindful is so commonly used. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand what it really means because of the confusion with the Western version of mindfulness. The commercialized Western version. So here is bringing attention inwards, focus on the present moment. That's really what it means, this mindful here. Sati, right? To bring the attention inwards. So now let's take a look at these 4. Introspection, those are 4. First is about the body. It is called Kayanupassana. And that is to observe the physical manifestation of reactions in the body. How did the body react when something happened? Second is Vedananupassana. And this is observing the manifestation of feeling, of sensations. Are you feeling comfortable or are you feeling agitated? Are you feeling pleasant or are you feeling unpleasant? So this is the feeling you have to observe. And then comes the emotional states. Observe the manifestation of emotional excitement, the arousal of emotional states. What emotional states? Are you angry? Are you upset? Are you fearful? Are you feeling shameful, guilty? Or are you blaming someone? Or are you frustrated? And so on. And finally, how did you interpret your circumstances? Observe the manifestation of thoughts and concepts. The interpretation of your circumstances, past, present, and future. How did you interpret what happened in the past? How did you interpret what's happening right now in front of you? And how are you going to interpret what will happen next to you? The interpretation. This is Dhammanupassana. So, observing emotional state is Chittanupassana, and observing our thoughts, conception of thoughts is Dhammanupassana. Okay? So these are the 4. So today we're going to mainly focus on the first 2, and in my next sharing I'll go deeper into talking about the last 2, the next 2. So the 4 focuses of introspection. The first one is about the body. Observe the physical manifestation of the reactions in the body in terms of disturbances. Your hormones being released, and now you're feeling tense, your heart is beating faster, you're feeling goose pimples, and then your body temperature rising, your blood pressure going up, and you can feel all that heat in the body, heat in the forehead, and so on. So these are all the symptoms going on in your body. So that is already what I pointed out earlier. Pay attention to that. The next is feeling. How does that make you feel in terms of the body's reaction? Right? Observe the manifestation as a feeling in the body, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, in terms of tension, pain, pleasure, agitation, discomfort, and various bodily sensations and feelings. So this is what you observe. And then the third one is to observe your emotional states, cittanupassana. Observe the manifestation in the form of emotional excitements or calmness of temperament, and what emotional states are aroused in terms of anger, fear, panic, anxiety, frustration, and so on. And finally, the fourth one is Dhammanupassana, your cognition or conception. Observe the manifestation of thoughts in the mind, which are the interpretation of circumstances, past, present, and future. How did you interpret those circumstances? We'll talk about the last two in the next sharing, that is cultivating emotional composure. Right? I have already covered very much the first two. So let's take a look at observing the body. What does it mean? When environmental activities stimulate the body, the sense organs, that stimulation gives rise to this activity called the panchakanda, the five aggregates. And then you begin to have a vijnana arises. Then you are aware of something you have seen, heard, smell, taste, and touch. Your mind begins to interpret it with mano, and then you begin to react with the chitta. And that causes various biochemical reactions in the body. So these biochemical reactions in the body disturb the body. So what does kayanupassana mean? Kayanupassana is referring to this reaction in the body. How did the body react? What happened? Is your heart beating faster? Is your lungs breathing? Are you breathing deeper, and so on? So the bodily reaction, that's kayanupassana. So that is the first, what we call the first foundation, or the first focus of introspection. So now the body has reacted. And then there are bodily feelings now. And it is this feeling, Vedananupassana, that you have to observe. And realize, what is it doing to you? Right? Is it making you feeling pain? Is it making you feel pleasure? Is it an agitation or calm, comfort or discomfort? So today's sharing will cover up to here, but then we will go on and look at that in the next sharing. Would be then when this bodily feeling arises, it causes mental proliferation. It causes emotional states to arise. The mind becomes disturbed and reaches a certain emotional state, and this is what you are observing. Cittanupassana. Observe the manifestation of emotional excitement and the arousal of emotional states such as fear, anger, anxiety, lust, hatred, grief, sorrow, despair, and so on. Observe what goes on, because that leads to your reaction in terms of lobha, dosa, moha. Right? Lust and greed, aversion and hatred, or delusion of self-centered existence. So finally, when the mind is disturbed, now you observe how is it disturbed? How is it affecting your thinking? How is it affecting the way you interpret your circumstances? That is Dhammanupassana. Observe the manifestation of thoughts, concepts, and interpretation of circumstances, past, present, and future. Okay, so these are the four focuses of introspection. Satipatthana. Not four foundations, because the four foundations is a generic translation, and it's not even the word mindfulness. It's really introspection, bringing your attention inwards. Introspection. So these are the four: kayanupassana, vedananupassana. These two relates to the body. We've already covered that today. We've completed that, and that calming that leads to bodily comfort. And the next two relates to your mind, and calming that leads to emotional composure, which I will cover in the next sharing, because that can be a bit long. We're going to draw in cognitive psychology to explain that further. Okay, so the 3 steps, basically to pause, to give time for your hormones to subside, to relax and learn to breathe, and finally to think. Now, breathing is very important. Benefits of breathing, very quickly, I'm going to touch on this. This is the most critically overlooked relaxation tool in the world. Breathing is the fastest way to relax the body and calm the mind. What does it do? It increases natural unforced oxygen intake, which is actually food for your cells. It actually stabilizes your heart rate and blood pressure. It regulates your body temperature and blood circulation. It restores and maintains homeostasis, which is a condition of stability in your body. And finally, it calms the amygdala. Amygdala is the part of the brain. When it gets excited, it causes a lot of suffering. It is your fear control center. Amygdala is the fear control center in the brain. It calms the amygdala by indicating the absence of threats, so that you can now able to calm down better. So this is a very powerful relaxation tool. Slow down your breathing. Practice this. The first thing there are two things you should then practice after this sharing. First, slow down your breathing. Take it to 4, 5, or 6 seconds instead of 2 or 3 seconds. Second, right, pay attention to what goes on in your body. Kayanupassana, when your heart beats faster or your lungs breathe deeper, and then you realize something is happening. Now, think very quickly. What does think mean? THINK is an acronym. T means before you act or speak, make sure it is something truthful. H, make sure it is helpful to whatever that's going on around you. I, that it helps you improve the situation or improve the relationship with the person who is upsetting you. N, determine whether it is necessary or not. Sometimes some things are not necessary to say, even if it is the truth. You know, if you think that I'm getting fatter, don't come and remind me, Billy, you're getting fatter. You know, is it necessary to say that? You know, because it causes people to get upset. And so if it is not necessary, then don't say it. Banyak cakap, banyak salah. And finally, most importantly, the last one is the most important. Whatever it is that you're going to do, make sure it is kind. Be kind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Be kind to yourself is something a lot of people overlook, you know. Self-compassion is the most powerful thing. And I pointed out the 3-step self-compassion is what? Pause, relax, and think. That is self-compassion. So with that, I basically finish off by talking about metta very quickly. Now, metta, we all know, what does metta mean? Let's just have a few words. What are some of a quick description. What is metta? Right? Kindness, loving kindness. What else? Universal love. Okay. I have come up with a very simple acronym for metta. M. M stands for magnanimous. Magnanimous is another word for generosity. It's actually a big word. Magnanimous means more than just being generous. It also means being broad-minded, open-minded. So magnanimous, a magnanimous person. In Chinese, they call it tai fong. A person who is very tai fong, open-minded, willing to share. So that is a magnanimous person. So it's more than just being generous. E for empathy. What is empathy? Empathy means you realize what other people are feeling, how other people are suffering. That's really what metta is. It's magnanimous, it is empathy, empathetic, thoughtfulness. Think about other people, how you can help them. And when you really want to help people, don't help in a rough way, help in a tender way. Be kind to them. So be tender. And finally, altruistic, right? Unselfishness or selflessness, to care for other people, to share with other people. So this is a very powerful acronym for metta. Magnanimous, empathetic, thoughtful, tender, and altruistic. Right? So finally, it leads us to practice metta in a proper way. And basically, metta is to send love when we see hatred. Right? To send forgiveness when we see resentment. To send strength when we see weakness. To send tranquility when we see chaos. Peace when we see hostility. Courage when we see fear. Hope when we see despair. Comfort when we see pain. Kindness when we see cruelty. And finally, compassion when we see suffering. And then we realize, may suffering ones be suffering free. The fear struck, fearless be. May grieving ones shed all grief. May all beings find peace and relief. If we're able to have this aspiration and able to translate this into action, that is the true essence of metta. And that is what the Buddha meant when he calls it loving kindness, universal benevolence, right? Basically, that is what metta is all about. So, who is the first person you should practice metta to? Yourself. Self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. Like, learn how to practice these things. Slow down your breathing. Observe what goes on in your body. So, thank you very much. I have completed the sharing for this morning. Right?